Millionaire saw a homeless woman with a baby in the forest. When he got closer, he was shocked to see that the baby had his birthmark. The night fell over the forest, enveloping the trees in deep, mysterious shadows. Easton, a 32-year-old young millionaire with dark hair and piercing green eyes, hurried among the twisted trunks. His expensive suit contrasted with the wild surroundings. He had gone out for a walk to clear his head after a heated argument with his newlywed wife, Violet. His thoughts whirled in his mind when suddenly he heard a faint cry coming from a nearby bush. Easton stopped, intrigued. How strange! Who would bring a baby into the forest at this hour? Is someone in danger? He muttered to himself. Driven by curiosity, Easton parted the branches and came upon a startling scene. A young woman, clearly a beggar with tattered clothes and disheveled hair, held a baby in her arms. Her wide, fearful eyes fixed on Easton, who stepped back, shocked. The woman, who appeared to be no more than 25 years old, trembled visibly. The baby in her arms, wrapped in a dirty blanket, whimpered softly. "Calm down. I won't hurt you. It's okay. Do you need help? Can I call someone or take you somewhere safe?" Easton spoke softly, trying to defuse the situation. The woman, whom Easton assumed to be a beggar due to her ragged clothes, did not respond. Her panic-filled eyes alternated between Easton and the baby. It was then that Easton noticed something that made his heart race. The baby had a birthmark identical to his, a small crescent-shaped mark on the left cheek. He stepped forward, incredulous, and whispered, "It can't be, Betty. That mark, it's just like mine. Who are you? Where did this baby come from?" The frightened beggar took a step back, stumbling over a protruding root. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. She fell backward, her arms opening involuntarily, and the baby slipped from her protective embrace. Easton watched in horror as the infant flew through the air, its tiny, defenseless body spinning in the night. In a desperate impulse, he lunged forward, arms outstretched, attempting to catch the baby before it hit the hard, rocky ground. His heart hammered in his chest as he shouted, "My God, no, please, let me catch it in time." Time seemed to freeze for an instant. Easton felt the weight of the baby in his arms a second before hitting the ground, rolling to protect the child from the impact. He lay there for a moment, panting, the infant clutched tightly to his chest. The little one was crying loudly now, frightened but seemingly unharmed. Easton sat up, quickly examining the baby for injuries. Relieved to find no visible harm, he looked at the beggar woman, who was still lying on the ground, seeming dazed. With a voice trembling from adrenaline and emotion, Easton said, "It's okay, the baby is safe, but you need to tell me what's going on. Why does this baby look so much like me? Where did you come from?" The beggar woman rose slowly, her eyes never leaving Easton. She seemed to be waging an internal battle, debating whether to trust this well-dressed stranger who had just saved the child. Finally, with a hoarse, hesitant voice, she spoke. I can't say. He's not mine, but I was forced to. Do this, please, sir, don't take me to the police. I didn't want to get into trouble." As the beggar woman spoke, Easton felt a wave of conflicting emotions: confusion, anger, concern, and a strange sense of connection to the child in the woman's arms. The beggar woman, eyes wide with fear, clutched the baby tightly to her chest and took a step back. Easton, sensing her intention to flee, reached out in a placating gesture. "Wait, please. I won't hurt you. I just want to help," he said, his voice betraying the urgency he felt. The woman, however, did not seem convinced. Her wild eyes scanned the dark forest, searching for an escape route. "You don't understand!" she cried, her voice hoarse with desperation. "I can't stay here. We'll be found. You shouldn't have seen me here." Before Easton could react, she turned and began to run, stumbling between the trees. Easton's heart raced as he pursued her, shouting, "Stop, it's dangerous to run like that with the baby." The forest seemed to conspire against them. Twisted roots emerged from the ground, threatening every step. Easton could hear the woman's ragged breathing and the frightened cries of the baby. He was almost upon them when the inevitable happened. The beggar woman tripped over a protruding root, losing her balance. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The woman fell forward, the baby slipping from her arms. Easton watched in horror as the tiny figure flew through the air, a shrill cry of fright cutting through the night's silence. He launched himself forward, arms outstretched, desperate to reach the child before it hit the hard, rocky ground. With a dull thud, the baby struck the forest floor, narrowly missing Easton's outstretched fingers. The ensuing silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of Easton's and the beggar woman's ragged breathing. For an agonizing moment, there was no sound from the small, motionless figure on the ground. Easton scrambled quickly to the baby, his heart pounding in his chest as he braced for the worst. With trembling hands, he gently turned the child over. "Oh God," he murmured, his voice thick with fear and guilt. "Please be okay. Please cry. Make any sound, anything." The baby's persistent silence was like a crushing weight on his chest, leaving him breathless and terrified. The baby's feeble cry broke the tense silence of the forest. Easton let out a sigh of relief, his hands still shaking as he carefully picked up the child. "Thank God," he murmured, quickly examining the tiny body for visible injuries. Beside him, the beggar woman lay motionless on the ground, apparently having fainted from the fall. Easton found himself torn between two urgencies, the injured baby and the unconscious woman. With his heart racing, Easton grabbed his phone and dialed emergency. "Please, I need an ambulance immediately," he said, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "I'm in the woods near Oak Road. There's an injured baby and an unconscious woman." As he gave further details about the location, Easton gently rocked the baby, who continued to cry softly. The minutes that followed seemed like an eternity. When the paramedics arrived, the scene turned into a whirlwind of activity. Easton reluctantly handed the baby over to one of the EMTs, watching anxiously as they examined it. Another paramedic tended to the beggar woman, prepping her for transport. "Sir, will you be riding in the ambulance? We'll have to take them to the hospital right away. Will you be coming with us?" one of the EMTs asked. Easton nodded quickly, unable to tear his eyes away from the tiny patient. Inside the ambulance, the air was thick with tension. The monitors beeped rhythmically, measuring the baby's and the beggar's vital signs. Easton sat feeling helpless as the paramedics worked. Suddenly, the beggar woman stirred, her eyes slowly opening. She looked around, confused, until her gaze settled on Easton. Easton, thank goodness you're here. I need to talk to you now. I'm not feeling well. I need you to know something," she murmured weakly. Shock rippled through Easton's body like an electric current. How do you know my name since I didn't tell you? What's going on? What do you need to tell me?" he asked, leaning in closer. The beggar woman tried to sit up, but was gently restrained by the paramedic. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, fixed on Easton's with a startling intensity. "The baby. He is," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. However, before she could finish her sentence, the monitors started beeping frantically. The beggar woman's face suddenly turned pale, her eyes rolling back into her head. "She's going into shock," one of the paramedics yelled. Easton was pushed aside as the crew moved swiftly to stabilize the patient. The rest of the ride passed in a blur of sirens, urgent voices, and the constant beep of monitors. When they arrived at the hospital, Easton found himself standing amidst the chaos, helplessly watching as the baby and the beggar woman were rushed inside. A nurse approached, gently guiding him to the waiting room. "We'll do everything we can. Please wait here," she assured. The hours that followed were the longest of Easton's life. He paced back and forth in the waiting room, his mind replaying the night's events incessantly. The beggar woman's words echoed in his head. "The baby. He is." What did she mean? How did she know his name? And why did the baby seem so familiar to him and have his birthmark? Why did he look like an exact replica of Easton himself as a child? Suddenly, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Nurses rushed hurriedly toward the neonatal intensive care unit, their faces tense and worried. Easton felt his heart clench as he caught snatches of their hurried conversations. "The baby's pressure is dropping rapidly. Critical desaturation. We need to act fast or we're going to lose this baby." Panic gripped Easton. He leapt to his feet, trying to follow the nurses, but was stopped by a hospital security guard. "Please, sir, let the doctors work," the man said firmly, yet with compassion in his eyes. Easton stepped back, feeling helpless and terrified. He leaned against the wall, his legs barely able to support him. "Please, God," he murmured, tears forming in his eyes. "Don't let that baby die. I need to know. I need to understand." Time seemed to crawl as Easton waited, each second a torment of uncertainty and fear. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a doctor appeared, his face weary but relieved. "The baby is stable now," he informed. "It was a close call, but he's a fighter. We had to resuscitate him, but he responded well. As for the woman, she's in a coma. We can't predict when or if she'll wake up." Easton nodded, taking in the information, a mixture of relief and concern flooding his body. "Can I see the baby? Please, let me see him. I know it sounds strange, but I barely know him, and yet I feel like I need to protect him. I need to know he's okay," he asked hesitantly, his voice trembling with emotion. In the neonatal intensive care unit, Easton approached the tiny bassinet where the baby lay. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, but the rhythmic sound of the heart monitor was reassuring. It was then that something caught his eye, an identification bracelet on the baby's tiny wrist. Leaning in closer, he read the name written on it. Owen. Easton's world seemed to stop. Owen. The name he and Nora, his ex-girlfriend, had chosen years ago when they dreamed of a future together. Before the relationship ended, months before his marriage to Violet, before everything changed. How was such a coincidence possible? As I watched little Owen sleeping, a flood of memories and questions inundated Easton's mind. The resemblance between him and the baby, the name on the wristband, the birthmark, the beggar's enigmatic words, everything seemed to point to a truth he barely dared to consider. His heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of fear and hope battling within him. "Who are you, Owen?" Easton whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "And how are you going to change my life?" The questions hung in the air unanswered, as the heart monitor continued its steady beep, reminding Easton that for now, the only certainty was that this little fighter had survived. The rest, the answers, the explanations, the consequences, would have to wait. For now, Easton allowed himself to simply be present, keeping vigil over the baby, who, in some mysterious way, seemed to be connected to him. The next day, Easton drove back home, little Owen securely strapped into the baby seat beside him. The morning sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the road. His heart raced, a mixture of joy at the baby being released and anxiety over what was to come. How would he explain all this to Violet, his new wife? The doctor's words echoed in his mind. "The baby is ready to go home, but he will need special care," he had said. Easton looked at the sleeping, innocent Owen and murmured, "Don't worry, little one. I'll take care of you no matter what happens." As he pulled up in front of his mansion, Easton took a deep breath, trying to brace himself for what was to come. He carefully gathered Owen and walked towards the door, each step seeming heavier than the last. Before he could reach for the handle, the door flew open violently. Violet stood there, her eyes red from crying and anger. "Where have you been? Why did you disappear all night?" she shouted, her voice quivering with emotion. "I was up all night imagining the worst, and you show up with... Her words trailed off as her eyes landed on Owen. Easton quickly stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Violet, I can explain," he began, but was cut off by a bitter laugh from his wife. "Explain? What is there to explain, Easton? That you have a hidden child, that you've been cheating on me?" Violet advanced, her eyes fixed on the baby. When she saw Owen's birthmark on his cheek, identical to Easton's, her face paled. "Why does that baby have your birthmark? No, this can't be true," she whispered, stumbling back. Easton gently placed Owen on the sofa, surrounding him with pillows to keep him safe. He turned to Violet, holding out his hands in a placating gesture. "Violet, I swear I don't know anything about him. I found him last night in the woods. The beggar had him." But Violet wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on Owen, a mixture of anger and pain in her gaze. How long have you been lying to me?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. The tension in the air was palpable. Easton tried to approach Violet, but she shrank back as if his touch could burn her. "I've never cheated on you, Violet," he said, his voice firm. "I love you. But this baby, I found him in the woods. I couldn't leave him there." The words seemed to spark something in Violet. She advanced, her eyes flashing with fury. "A baby in the woods, And you just bring him into our home? And what about our plans, Easton? Our family? You didn't think about me for a second." Her voice rose, echoing through the mansion. Easton felt anger rising within him. Months of pent-up frustrations and unspoken secrets came bubbling to the surface. "Didn't think about you. What about your nights out, Violet? The times you'd come home late, smelling like different perfume." He saw the shock in her eyes and pressed on, the words pouring out in a torrent. "You think I didn't notice? The looks, the hidden messages? Maybe this baby is a chance for us to do something good, something pure amidst all this mistrust." The sound of the slap echoed through the room. Violet had crossed the space between them in an instant, her hand leaving a red mark on Easton's cheek. "How dare you?" she hissed, tears streaming down her face. "I never cheated on you, never. Those nights, I was planning a surprise for you. A trip to try for a child of our own. How ironic, isn't it? While I dreamed of our family, you bring a stranger's baby into our home." She laughed bitterly. Owen's cries cut through the heated argument. Easton instinctively moved towards the baby, but Violet blocked his path. "Don't you dare touch him. That baby doesn't belong here. He's not ours," she said, her voice shaking. Easton felt his heart break at the look of pure contempt on Violet's face as she looked at the baby. "He's innocent in all this, Violet. We can't blame him for the circumstances," Easton pleaded. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps came from the hallway. The housekeeper, a middle-aged woman who had worked for them for years, entered the room, her face pale with worry. "Sir, the police are here," she said, her voice trembling. Easton and Violet whirled around, shocked, to face the front door. Through the glass windows, they could see the flashing lights of several police cruisers. Easton's heart pounded. Had someone reported the incident in the woods? Or was it for bringing the baby? Or was there something more, something he still didn't know? While Easton and Violet remained paralyzed, the sound of the doorbell echoed through the mansion. The baby's crying increased, as if he could feel the tension in the air. Easton looked at Violet, then at the baby, and finally at the door. He knew that by opening it, his life would change forever. With one last deep breath, he walked towards the entrance, questions piling up in his mind. What did the police want? How would this affect the baby? And above all, would there be any chance of saving his marriage to Violet after all this? The answers were on the other side of that door, and Easton knew there was no turning back. Easton opened the door with trembling hands, facing two police officers with serious expressions. "Mr. Easton Clark, we need you to accompany us to the station to provide some clarification about a baby you brought from the hospital. Please come with us," ordered the taller man, his deep voice echoing in the entrance hall. Easton nodded, feeling the weight of Violet's gaze on his back. Easton knew his decision to bring the baby home would have consequences, but he didn't expect them to be so swift and severe. "May I know what I'm being accused of?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The shorter officer replied, "For now there are no formal charges, sir, but there are suspicions of kidnapping." The journey to the police station was tense and silent. Violet insisted on accompanying them, her face a mask of contained fury. Easton tried to explain the situation to the officers, but was advised to save his comments for the official statement. As the police car cut through the city streets, Easton couldn't help but think of the baby, left in the care of the maid. Did I do the right thing? Or did I just ruin my life for a complete stranger? He wondered. At the station, Easton was taken to a cold, impersonal interrogation room. The detective who received him had tired but alert eyes. "Mr. Clark, we're investigating the disappearance of a baby from Central Hospital a week ago. The baby you brought home matches the description." Easton felt his blood run cold. "But I found him in the forest last night, in the arms of a beggar woman, who I even took to the hospital. There was no one to stay with him while she was admitted," he protested. The detective raised a skeptical eyebrow. "A convenient story, don't you think? Especially considering your connection to the child's mother." Before Easton could process what the detective had said, the room's door burst open violently. A woman entered, her eyes red from crying and her face a mix of relief and fury. Easton felt his heart stop for a moment. It was Nora, his ex-girlfriend. "Where is my son? What did you do to him? Why did you have her take the baby from my arms? I had barely met him. You had no right. Give me my son back now, she screamed, advancing towards Easton. The officers held her back, preventing her from reaching him. Easton was paralyzed, the puzzle pieces fitting together in his mind. The baby in the forest, the birthmark, the name Owen, it all made a terrible sense now. The room erupted into chaos. Violet, who had been watching from a corner, advanced towards Nora. "Your son, what are you talking about?" she shouted, her face twisted with anger and confusion. Nora turned to Violet, her eyes flashing. "Easton! This man," she pointed at Easton, "is the father of my son. The son he apparently had a beggar woman kidnap. He tried to take my son away from me." Easton tried to get up, protest his innocence, but was pushed back into the chair by an officer. "I didn't know, I swear I didn't know one," he cried, desperate. The detective tried to calm the situation, his voice rising above the tumult. "Ladies, please calm down. Mr. Clark, I need you to tell us exactly what happened last night." Easton took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. He began to recount the events of the previous night, from the encounter with the beggar woman in the forest to arriving at the hospital. As he spoke, he could see the expressions on Nora and Violet's faces changing, from anger to confusion, and then to a reluctant understanding. When Easton finished his account, a heavy silence fell over the room. The detective scratched his chin, pensive. "Your story is mine unusual, Mr. Clark, but we have a witness at the hospital who confirms part of it. The woman you mentioned, the beggar, is in a coma, but was identified as a fugitive psychiatric patient." Nora sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "My baby. My little Owen. In that woman's hands for a week." Violet, still furious but visibly shaken, retreated to a corner of the room, her eyes fixed on Easton with a mix of accusation and doubt. The detective stood up, his expression serious. "Mr. Clark, although your story seems to be true, we still have many questions. You're free to go for now, but don't leave the city. We'll need further statements in the coming days." Easton nodded, feeling exhausted and emotionally drained. As he rose to leave, his eyes met Nora's. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I really didn't know." Nora stared at him for a long moment before averting her gaze, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Violet, for her part, left the room without a word, leaving Easton alone with the weight of his actions and the consequences yet to come. The tension between Easton, Nora, and Violet was palpable. Easton turned to Nora, his eyes full of hurt and anger. "Why did you hide this from me, Nora? A child. My child." His voice trembled with pent-up emotion. Nora stared at him, tears still streaming down her face. "You think it was easy for me? I found out I was pregnant after we broke up. You were already with her." She pointed at Violet, who watched the scene with an expression of shock and fury. Easton took a step towards Nora, his hands shaking. "I had a right to know. You can't just—" Before Easton could finish, the phone on the detective's desk rang shrilly, cutting through the tense air of the room. The detective answered quickly, his expression changing from surprise to concern as he listened. He hung up and turned to the group. "The woman who kidnapped the baby, her name is Lydia. She woke up and escaped from the hospital." The shock of the news fell upon everyone like a bucket of cold water. Nora let out a muffled scream. Violet turned pale and Easton felt his legs weaken. How is this possible? Weren't there police officers at the hospital? How could this woman escape like that? He asked incredulously. The detective shook his head, looking equally perplexed. "We don't know how she escaped yet, but I'll mobilize all units to find her." The news of the kidnapper's escape seemed to change something in Nora. She stood up abruptly, wiping away her tears with determination. "I need to see my son now if she tries to take him again. No, I have to go now." Her voice left no room for argument. Easton nodded slowly, aware of Violet's furious gaze. "He's at our house, he's safe," he said softly. Nora looked at him for a moment before nodding. "Let's go then. I want to take Owen home. Where he belongs." The words hit Easton like a punch in the stomach. He wanted to protest, to say that he had rights too, but knew it wasn't the time. "Okay, let's get Owen," he agreed reluctantly. The drive back to Easton's mansion was tense and silent. Violet refused to ride in the same car, opting for a taxi instead. When they arrived, Nora ran inside, guided by the maid to the room where Owen was. Easton followed her, his heart torn between the joy of seeing his son and the pain of knowing he would lose him again. Nora picked Owen up, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Mommy's here, my love. Forgive me. She took you from me. I was still groggy from the medication. I'll never let anyone take you again," she whispered, kissing the baby's forehead. Easton watched the scene, feeling like an intruder in his own home. "Nora, I know I have no right to ask, but can I see him sometimes?" he asked hesitantly. Nora looked at Easton, her eyes softening slightly. "You're his father, Easton. Of course you can see him. But I need you to promise me, Easton. I need you to promise you won't try to take him away from me," Nora pleaded, Owen secure in her arms. Easton followed her to the door, his heart heavy. "I promise, Nora. I would never do that. I just want the right to be part of my own son's life. I'll provide everything he needs and I want to be present," Easton said sincerely. Nora looked at him and at the door before replying. "I'll call you tomorrow so you can see him," she said softly before getting into the waiting taxi. Easton stood at the door, watching the car drive away, taking his newly discovered son with it. When he turned to go back inside, he found Violet standing in the hall, her eyes burning with fury. "I hope you're happy. You just destroyed our marriage over a child you didn't even know existed," she hissed. Without waiting for a response, she went upstairs, leaving Easton alone with his swirling thoughts. Night fell over the mansion, bringing with it an unsettling quietness. Easton couldn't sleep, his mind replaying the day's events incessantly. Violet had locked herself in the guest room, refusing to speak to him. Around midnight, as he gazed out at the garden from the veranda, movement in the shadows caught his attention. Intrigued and a little apprehensive, he went down the stairs and out into the garden, his eyes scanning the darkness. That's when he saw her, the woman from the woods, Lydia, as the detective had said, emerging from the shadows of the backyard like a ghost. "You, the kidnapper! What are you doing here? I'll call the police. If you come near my son again, you'll see what I'm capable of," Easton exclaimed, his voice a mix of surprise and anger. Lydia looked scared, her eyes wide and wild. I needed to see you. Please don't call the police. She stammered, taking a hesitant step towards Easton. "I need to explain." Easton felt a wave of conflicting emotions, anger, confusion, curiosity. "Explain what? Why you stole my son? What made you take him from his mother's arms?" Easton asked furiously. Lydia flinched at his words but kept approaching. "No, please, let me explain. It was never my intention. Weeks ago, I managed to escape from the psychiatric hospital." Her words came out in a rushed torrent, as if afraid she wouldn't have time to say it all. "I didn't want to hurt anyone, I swear. I was running away when—" Before she could answer, a scream cut through the night air. "Easton, what's going on?" Violet shouted, standing on the porch, her eyes wide in shock at seeing Lydia there with her husband. She pulled her phone out of her robe pocket. "I'm calling the police right now. You started this mess. Now you'll pay," Violet said, dialing on the phone to report Lydia, who panicked, turning to flee. Easton, acting on instinct, grabbed her arm. "Wait, you need to turn yourself in. It's the only way to fix this." But Lydia shook herself free with surprising force, disappearing into the shadows of the garden before Easton could stop her. He stood there, dazed. Minutes later, the sound of sirens began echoing in the distance. Looking at Violet, who stared back at him with a mixture of anger and accusation, Easton felt the weight of all the decisions and secrets that had brought him to this moment. How could he explain something he barely understood? How could he fix the damage to his marriage, to his life, when the truth seemed more complicated with every passing moment? The next day, the sky dawned grey and cold, reflecting Easton's state of mind. He had barely slept, tormented by the events of the previous night and Lydia's escape. The police had searched the property and the surrounding area, but found no sign of the woman. Now sitting in his car outside Nora's house, Easton felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. He looked at the small teddy bear on the passenger seat, a gift for Owen. It's now or never. Time to meet my son for real. I'll finally be able to hold him in my arms with the certainty that he's mine," he murmured to himself, gathering courage to get out of the car. Easton didn't notice the car parked discreetly across the street, nor Violet's watchful eyes observing his every move. He walked up to Nora's front door, his heart pounding in his chest. Before he could ring the doorbell, the door opened. Nora was there, Owen in her arms, her eyes a mixture of caution and resignation. "You came, I thought you wouldn't come," she said simply, stepping aside to let him in. Easton nodded, swallowing hard. "I needed to see him." "See them," he replied, his eyes fixed on Owen's little face. Inside the house, the air was thick with unresolved tension. Nora led Easton to the living room, where a playmat and scattered toys indicated a baby's constant presence. She gently placed Owen on the mat and turned to Easton. "You have an hour. After that, I need to put him down for a nap," she said, her voice firm but not hostile. Easton nodded, grateful for the opportunity. He knelt beside Owen, marveling at every little movement and sound the baby made. "Hi, Owen. I know we've met before, but I didn't properly introduce myself. I'm your dad," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Outside, Violet watched the scene through the window, her face a mask of contained fury. She saw Easton pick Owen up, saw the radiant smile that lit up his face when the baby grabbed his finger. Every moment of connection between father and son was like a knife in her heart. Violet retreated into the shadows of a nearby tree, pulling out her phone. With trembling fingers of rage, she dialed a number she knew by heart. When the call was answered, she urgently whispered, "The plan failed. We need a new arrangement. I don't want you to mess this up. I want everything to end exactly as we agreed. If there are any mistakes..." "Well, you already know what will happen," she threatened in a cold tone to the person on the other end of the line. Inside the house, oblivious to the drama unfolding outside, Easton was completely absorbed in Owen. He played with the baby, making funny faces and sounds that made Owen laugh. Nora watched from a distance, her expression gradually softening. "He has your smile," she commented softly, breaking the silence. Easton looked at her, surprised and touched by the remark. "He has your eyes," he responded, feeling a pang of regret for all the lost time. The hour passed too quickly for Easton's liking. When Nora announced it was time for Owen's nap, he felt as if he was being torn from a dream. Reluctantly, he handed the baby back to his mother, their fingers brushing in the process. For a moment they stood there, connected by the tiny being they had created together. "Can I come back tomorrow? I need to see him. You don't know how happy I am that he's all right and that... He's my son. Can I come tomorrow, please?" Easton asked, his voice barely disguising his hope. Nora hesitated for an instant before nodding. "Yes, same time," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. Easton left Nora's house feeling both light and heavy at the same time. The joy of spending time with Owen competed with the sadness of having to leave him. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice Violet standing beside his car. His heart sank at the cold expression on his wife's face. "Violet, what are you doing here? He began, but she cut him off with an abrupt gesture. "Don't even try to explain, Easton. You've chosen your path. Now deal with the consequences," she hissed. Before he could respond, Violet turned and walked quickly away, leaving Easton alone with the weight of his choices and the dread of what the future might bring. Days later, the tension in the mansion was still palpable, with the couple barely exchanging words beyond the strictly necessary. Easton divided his time between work and visits to Owen, while Violet remained distant and cold. That afternoon, however, something changed. When Easton came down the stairs ready for another day at the office, he found Violet in the living room, a forced smile on her face. "Easton, dear, I've been thinking... Perhaps I reacted poorly to this whole situation with Owen," she began, her voice strangely sweet. Easton stopped, surprised by his wife's sudden change in attitude. He observed her carefully, noticing the tension in her shoulders despite the soft smile. "What do you mean, Violet?" he asked cautiously, fearing this was merely the prelude to another heated argument. Violet approached, her eyes fixed on his. "I mean that. Perhaps it's time to accept reality. Owen is your son and part of our lives now." She paused, taking a deep breath as if gathering courage. "In fact, I was thinking, what if I took care of him today? You could bring him here and I'd stay with him while you work," she asked, her smile widening with every word. The offer caught Easton completely off guard. He stared at Violet, searching her face for any sign of deception or hidden resentment. But all he saw was an expression of determination and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Are you sure, Violet?" he asked, his voice betraying a mixture of hope and skepticism. That would mean so much to me." "I'm sure, Easton. It's time we make this work, as a family." Violet nodded, her smile now seeming a little more genuine. The words, "as a family," echoed in Easton's mind, bringing a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Violet." "I'll call Nora right away," he said, leaning in to kiss her on the cheek. Hours later, Easton left the house, casting one last glance at Violet, who held Owen in her arms. The baby seemed calm, playing with a colorful rattle. Nora sent all the instructions. "There are diapers, milk, and everything he needs, but if you want, I can leave him with her." "Are you sure you'll be okay?" Easton asked for the third time, his hand hesitating on the doorknob. Violet rolled her eyes, a forced smile on her lips. "Of course, dear. Owen and I are going to have a lot of fun, aren't we, little one?" She gently poked the baby's belly, making him laugh. Easton felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Oh, you're amazing, Violet. Thank you for doing this." With one last wave, he left, closing the door behind him. As soon as the sound of Easton's car faded into the distance, Violet's smile vanished like smoke. She looked at Owen, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "So it's just you and me now, little intruder," she hissed, her voice laced with venom. Owen, oblivious to the change in atmosphere, continued playing with his rattle. Violet walked to the window, watching the empty street. "You have no idea the chaos you've caused, do you? Months of planning, all ruined by your mere existence," she muttered, more to herself than to the baby. With deliberate steps, Violet carried Owen to the room Easton had prepared for him. She placed Owen in the crib, leaning over him with a threatening look. "You know, little Owen, I had big plans for my life with Easton. A brilliant career, travels around the world, maybe even our own children. When I was ready," she whispered, her voice dangerously low. "But you ruined all of that." Owen began to whimper, perhaps sensing the hostility emanating from Violet. She picked him up roughly, rocking him with mechanical movements. "Shh, shh, don't cry, little bastard. It won't do any good," she whispered, but her voice held no trace of comfort. She walked around the room, her eyes roaming over the childish objects with disdain. "You think you can just show up and take my place? The place of the children I should have with Easton? Well, I have news for you, that's not going to happen." Her voice shook with contained rage. Violet put Owen back in the crib, watching him with a calculating expression. "You know I can't let you ruin everything. I need to do something about it, it's nothing personal." She leaned closer, her eyes locked with Owen's. At that moment, Violet's phone vibrated in her pocket. She took it out, seeing a message from an unknown number. "Everything is ready, awaiting your orders." Violet smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked at Owen one last time, who was now starting to close his eyes to sleep peacefully, oblivious to the danger surrounding him. "Sleep tight, little Owen. Enjoy it while you can. Because very soon you'll be nothing but a sad memory in Easton's life," she whispered, her voice laced with a veiled threat. With those words, Violet left the room, closing the door softly behind her, leaving Owen alone in the oppressive silence as she prepared to set her sinister plan in motion. Hours later, the end of the afternoon invaded Easton's office. He was immersed in paperwork, trying to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept wandering to Owen and Violet at home. The phone on his desk rang, breaking his concentration. It was his secretary, her voice tense and hesitant. "Mr. Clark, there's a woman in the lobby insisting on seeing you. She seems very nervous and says it's urgent." Easton frowned, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. "What's her name? I'm not expecting anyone and have no meeting scheduled. Did she identify herself?" he asked, dreading the answer. "She said her name is Lydia, sir." Easton's heart leapt. "Send her up immediately," he ordered, his mind spinning with possibilities. Moments later, Lydia entered his office, her eyes wide and frightened, her hands visibly trembling. Easton stood up, a mixture of anger and concern on his face. "What are you doing here? You should be," he demanded. But Lydia interrupted him, her voice broken and desperate. "Please, you need to listen to me. Owen is in danger," she said. The words hit Easton like a punch in the stomach. He grabbed Lydia's arms, his face inches from hers. "What are you talking about? What do you know about Owen?" Lydia began speaking rapidly, the words pouring out in a torrent of confession and fear. "Violet and I have known each other since college. She found out about Nora's pregnancy before you." Easton felt the ground disappear beneath his feet, his mind struggling to process the information. "What? How?" he stammered. But Lydia continued, the words gushing as if a dam had burst. "Violet took me out of the psychiatric clinic. She knew I was committed, and that if she was caught, I would be easily discredited. Violet planned everything months ago. The plan was carefully thought out by her. I was supposed to steal the baby as soon as it was born and hand it over to her in exchange for my freedom from that clinic. She was going to give it up for adoption, where no one could find it." The room seemed to spin around Easton. He staggered to his chair, feeling as if he had taken a physical blow. "This can't be true," he muttered, more to himself than to Lydia. But the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit in his mind, forming a terrible picture. Lydia continued, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't do it. When I got to the forest with Owen, I couldn't hand him over. That's when you found me. I have a severe disorder, but I have a heart. I couldn't do that to an innocent child, no matter how much I wanted to get out of that clinic. But now Violet, she called me this afternoon. She said she got the baby and that she's going to take him for adoption. Easton, you have to stop her. There's already a family willing to take him and take him out of the country." She choked, sobbing. Easton's world crumbled in that instant. Violet's betrayal, the danger Owen faced, it all blended into an overwhelming wave of panic and anger. He stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair in the process. "My God, Owen, my son, this can't be happening. Why?" he shouted, running to the phone. His fingers were shaking as he dialed the police number. "Emergency, please," he said as soon as they answered, his voice shaking with urgency. "I need to report an ongoing kidnapping. My son, my wife." The words came out broken, almost incoherent. As he spoke to the police, Easton picked up his cell phone with his other hand, dialing Nora's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice sleepy. "Easton? What?" He interrupted her, the words pouring out in a frantic rush. "Nora, Owen is in danger. Violet, she—" He could barely form coherent sentences, panic taking over. On the other end of the line, he heard Nora gasp, fully awake now. "What? Easton, what are you talking about? What happened to my son? I don't understand. Please tell me he's okay." Her voice was laced with fear and confusion. Easton ended the call with the police and turned his full attention to Nora, trying to control his voice. "Nora, meet me immediately. I'll explain everything on the way, but we need to get there as fast as possible before it's too late. We need to save our son." He hung up without waiting for a response, turning to Lydia, who remained standing, trembling. "Are you coming with me? You're going to tell all of this to the police," he said firmly. Lydia nodded, surrendering as she followed Easton running out of the office. In the elevator heading down to the parking lot, Easton felt his heart pounding in his chest. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. Next to him, Lydia muttered repeatedly, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause harm. I just wanted to get out of that horrible place," she pleaded. Easton barely heard her, his mind focused on one thing, getting to Owen before it was too late. As the car accelerated through the city streets, police sirens echoing in the distance, Easton couldn't shake the terrifying thought that consumed him. What if I'm too late? What if Owen has already disappeared? What if he never sees his baby again? Night fell over the city, and with it, the shadow of fear and uncertainty over the fate of an innocent child. Easton's car screeched to a halt in front of his mansion. Nora was already there, her face pale with worry, especially when she saw Lydia accompanying him. Without wasting time with explanations, Easton grabbed his cell phone and dialed Violet's number, his heart beating so hard it seemed like it wanted to burst out of his chest. When Violet answered, he took a deep breath, forcing his voice to sound calm and determined. "Violet, you were right. The baby will get in our way. I can't be a father right now. I have to give this child up for adoption without Nora knowing," he said, trying to control the tremor in his voice. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before she replied, "Oh, Easton, I knew you would understand. I'm downtown, let's get rid of this baby and be happy." Easton hung up as soon as she gave the address, exchanging a meaningful look with Nora. "Let's go. Let's get our son," he said, his voice laced with determination. The journey to the adoption center was a race against time. Easton drove like his life depended on it, while Nora clung to the dashboard, while Lydia cried in the back seat. Police sirens echoed not far behind them, a promise of justice about to be fulfilled. When they arrived at the address, Easton barely waited for the car to come to a complete stop before leaping out. He ran to the entrance, Nora right behind, their hearts pounding in unison with a single thought: Owen. As they burst through the door, they were met with Violet, holding Owen in her arms. Her eyes widened in surprise and then narrowed in fury as she realized she had fallen into a trap. "You lied to me!" she hissed, clutching Owen tighter to herself. Easton took a step forward, his hands outstretched in a placating gesture. "Violet, it's over. Hand over Owen, don't make things worse for yourself." The confrontation that followed was intense and charged with emotion. Violet, cornered, alternated between threats and pleadings, while Easton and Nora tried to approach carefully, fearing for Owen's safety. "You don't understand. I did this for us, Easton. For our future," Violet shouted, tears streaming down her face. Nora, unable to contain herself any longer, took a step forward. "Please, Violet," she pleaded, her voice choked. "He's just a baby. Our baby." At that moment, the police sirens sounded closer, and the sound of hurried footsteps filled the hallway. Violet, realizing she was trapped, looked frantically around for an escape. Her eyes landed on a nearby window, and for one terrible moment, Easton feared she might do something drastic. "Violet, it's okay. Just give me Owen. Please," he said softly, taking another step toward her. Time seemed to freeze for an instant. Then, as if a spell had been broken, Violet crumpled, falling to her knees. Her arms went slack around Owen, and Nora quickly stepped forward to take the baby. In the same instant, the police burst into the room, guns drawn. Violet was immediately arrested, as was Lydia, who stood silently in a corner watching it all with wide eyes of fear and remorse. As the two women were handcuffed and led away, Easton turned to Nora and Owen. The baby, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded, smiled at the familiar faces of his parents. Easton felt tears of relief stream down his face as he embraced Nora and Owen, forming a protective circle around his little family. Easton and Nora, united by adversity and love for Owen, decided to give their relationship a chance. On a sunny autumn afternoon, they sat in the garden of their new home, watching Owen take his first unsteady steps on the soft grass. Easton looked at Nora, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "Do you believe in second chances?" he asked softly. Nora smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "I'm looking at one right now," she replied, leaning in for a tender kiss. Owen giggled, toddling towards his parents, his little arms outstretched. Easton scooped him up, feeling the comforting weight of his son in his arms. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Easton knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together as a family. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing exciting stories almost every day. Do not miss the next surprising narrative that is about to appear on your screen. We are incredibly grateful to have you here with us. Now you can click on the links that are appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, filled with valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.